colourful pomp for a royal birthday in Trooping the Colours for the Queen.
June 1961. Queen Elizabeth was now 35. Among the most admired figures in the world, there was a certain celebrity to her life, touring Rome, entertaining a president. But nothing in the summer of '61 would compare with the Royalmania a generation later. That same summer, Diana Spencer, the daughter of an earl, was born at Park House, which was on the Queen's Sandringham estate. Diana and her family were not royals, but were well acquainted with the royal family. For Diana, a position of unexpected advantage.
She was charming and delightful and giggly and sweet and young and unspoiled.
Meantime, Charles, now past the age of 30, was being pressed by his father, Prince Philip, to marry. And Diana, whom Charles knew and recently dated, seemed perfect.
When it was decided that Charles and Diana were going to get engaged, the Queen was delighted. And she wrote a letter to one of her friends and said, you know, Diana is one of us.
What followed was the wedding of the century, what seemed like a royal fairy tale, a marriage that soon produced what was of utmost importance to the Queen, an heir to the throne.
It's perhaps the most fundamental duty of a monarch to ensure the succession. She must also have felt particular pleasure when Charles and Diana produced first an heir and then a spare.
The Queen wanted the marriage to succeed.
It was very important because her son is the future. He is the future king. She needed someone that she thought was stable to carry on the line, as it were.
But the stability Queen Elizabeth had established for the royal family would be sorely tested. Diana was insecure, and Charles grew more distant, and the tabloid coverage was insatiable. The Queen tried to help.
She even called a meeting of all the Fleet Street editors of newspapers and said, you know, treat Diana gently, don't follow her everywhere.
I was not aware of how overwhelming that attention would become.
The fairy tale began to crumble. It seems Charles' relationship with an old flame, Camilla Parker Bowles, was never quite extinguished, and now she was back, and it was an embarrassment. Diana spilled her story in a tell-all book. It was a year the Queen herself described as annus horribilis.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure.
But the cracks in the royal family only grew. In a BBC interview, Diana stated bluntly, there were 3 people in her marriage.
So it was a bit crowded.
And more damaging, in the Queen's eyes perhaps, Diana questioned whether Charles was really up to the job of being king.
It wasn't until the day when Diana gave that famous BBC interview in which she questioned the very suitability of Charles to become king that the Queen finally snapped and took decisive action and instructed them to divorce without delay.
The Queen and Diana had always remained gracious toward one another, but with the divorce, their public lives would not intersect again, until that day in 1997.
Tonight's accident is a terrible tragedy.
Diana's death at just 36 caused an outpouring of grief the world has seldom seen. The Queen, reticent as always, decided to stay out of view.
Very strange, we haven't heard anything from them, you know, it's been silence.
Emotions were raw. The perception of regal insensitivity risked damaging the monarchy.
The Queen's quiet reserve for once didn't work. She did lose touch with her subjects.
The Queen saw firsthand how the public felt, and finally recognized in a television address Diana's personal qualities that had graced the royal family.
In good times and bad, she never lost her capacity to smile and laugh, nor to inspire others with her warmth and kindness.
It was well judged, it sounded sincere, and it probably did the trick. It began to turn what had been a very dangerous tide.
Because of Diana, the Queen was thrust into the modern era of public scrutiny. The two could not have been more different, one reserved with a profound sense of duty, in the other a capacity to touch the common people. Someday, the qualities of each may well guide the future king in reimagining the British monarchy.
It's William that carries Diana's mantle, and I think the Queen was immensely proud of how William shaped up and the responsibilities he took on.
And in the fullness of time, It'll probably always be possible to see, not just in the future kings and queens of England, but in the very institution of the monarchy itself, a little strand of Diana DNA.